Hello, folks. Thank you all for joining us. I am Paul O'Connor. I head up the medical development segment here at Boston Engineering, and I'm joined by Justin. Justin, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Justin Makris. I work in sales here at Boston Engineering. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and we're excited to have you.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a number of topics, and this session is intended to be very interactive, so don't be shy about adding your comments, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. No need to wait to the end with your questions. We'll try to answer them as we go. So, Justin, where would you like to start? What topics are out there that are really front and center in medical development these days?
Thank you, Paul. Everybody's talking about the cloud. Like, what is the cloud? It seems like this huge unknown entity
Yeah.
out there. So let's begin there, please.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly the darling of the investment world these days, and it's sort of easy to understand that the more information, the better, and the more information that's available to a clinician, the better. Um, but put yourself in the shoes of a primary care physician and what they're dealing with. They're receiving all kinds of information from different sources, different formats. Uh, they need to be an IT professional essentially to understand and to get to the specific information that's relevant to a patient. There's no standardization that's out there, and as we're developing this capability, you really need to understand what you're trying to achieve versus just saying yes, we need it to be connected, because you're adding a whole lot of complexity to your development path. And you need to understand the real value of what this capability is bringing to your particular product, and you need to make sure that it's seamless, um, and also understand the cost to maintain this. We spend a lot of time coaching our clients on the options available and the importance of defining the clearest path forward. It's it does seem to be very confusing these days, and it is. There's a number of platforms that are out there to utilize, but it is even more important these days to really understand what you're trying to achieve with this capability, and to make sure that your information and your data is going to the right places, for the right reasons, at the right time, at the right level of detail.
And I think a lot of our projects that you and I are involved in, it doesn't have to be a day one lift with cloud computing. We often do design for the future. So if you have a connected device and your future wish list item is the cloud, we design projects and scope in a way that you're not stymied in the future. We actually future proof many of our projects, as you know, and we can take advantage of that technology in the future. But I do think it's important. That also kind of transitions into perhaps our next talking point of design thinking, having the cloud in mind, having different features in mind. Would you like to transition into that to talk about that next?
Go right ahead.
So I think that we all have products that we know and love, perhaps an MP3 player, perhaps your favorite iPhone or other device. And when a product is designed well, it's designed for the user in mind. One of my favorite devices is my old iPad. Sorry about that. But those are designed with the user in mind. So a lot of toddlers were actually part of the iPad design. So a lot of projects, when you think outside the box, they are designed really, really well for the user in mind, pulling information from a lot of different sources. Do you agree with that, Paul?
I do. I do. So we have a question from the audience from Rabish. Sorry, Rabi. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the word. Your name. What is the best strategy to help doctors integrate this cloud-based system into their practice?
Great question.
Ooh, that is a big question. Uh, a lot of times the doctors are not actually the decision makers, especially if they're part of a large practice. So there could be a lot of concerns about cybersecurity, patient data, managing all that. And it really comes down to um, the ability within a particular practice to standardize the type of information that a particular clinician would want to receive. And, as I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to essentially police all these different inputs into the clinician's office, because they're coming from different companies, they're coming with different formats, they're coming with different profiles. So what a clinician can do is make sure that they're involved with the people that are providing this information, and to clearly outline the type of information that they're receiving and how they'd like to receive it, to make it as seamless as possible. It can be a lot of work to do this, but until there's some standardization that's out there, it's going to continue to be a challenge, and that's going to be a very, very difficult question to answer. But thank you for the question. Hopefully that's somewhat of an answer. But it's a huge issue right now, and there's no one clear answer. But it's, again, I would put it back on the developers to build that into their development path, to make sure that the information is as simple as possible, and it's going to work as seamlessly as possible with a number of platforms. And that sort of gets into electronic medical records, EMR. And again, those aren't standardized either. So there's a lot of different platforms out there that don't talk to each other. So it's very cumbersome to deal with this particular question, because the technologies are happening so quickly and the information is flowing so fast. The ability to absorb all that information is a bottleneck right now.
Interesting, Paul. What about reimbursement? Does it have to be designed in a way where insurance companies would reimburse a hospital, or is there a grant that they can apply if they follow a certain protocol in designing the cloud?
Yeah, so that has to be built into the business model. That's not even really a product development question. That is what does your business actually want to do, and the ability to get paid, unfortunately, is pretty necessary if you want to be in business, and that has to be part of your thinking as you're developing your business model, in terms of how your product or service or your connected device is actually going to be reimbursed. And it's going to vary by specialty. It's going to vary by device type. It's going to vary by application. So all those have to be understood, as you're developing your business case, and you figure out how you're going to do that. How are you going to make money? We've seen a number of clients where that's been a real struggle, and they haven't been able to advance past that point. All right, we have a follow-up question. Doctors are concerned about such systems that may add extra work to their practice. Yes, absolutely. In addition to the cybersecurity, how can you convince them it maybe actually make their life easier? What is the best educational strategy, and how can we educate the payers? I think we've touched on that a little bit. In terms of educating, it really has to be educating it's education on both sides. The clinicians have to educate industry, and industry has to educate the clinicians, and all that has to come together. I've talked to my primary care physician, and they're getting buried with information, and their workday goes late into the evening, essentially. And if they're not checking on something, they feel like they're missing out. So there's a ton of information out there, and it's getting the clinician just the information. If they just need a blood pressure, then have that option of just getting blood pressure and not have to go through a whole raft of pages and reams of data to get that information. So it's on the developers again to present the information easier, and then in their initial evaluation with their clinicians, have them see the benefit in what it might save them and how it might make their workday, more efficient versus what it is now. And it's likely more cumbersome in a lot of cases. And in terms of the payers for this, that is going to be, you need to demonstrate that efficiency model. How is the information being conveyed, and how is it more efficient? And that goes back to the developers and the people that are pushing this information onto the clinicians.
And a little bit of that is some of the medicine that I'm part of for like diabetes care, for instance. If the doctors and the clinicians have a wish list of, Justin, I would like to test 10 times a day blood sugar, we would then backfill into machine learning, collecting data, and then adding that to a cloud. So for your cloud question, we can make the cloud the foundation of what testing needs to be done, what amount of data needs to be collected from X number of patients. So a little bit of that has to do with the medicine involved. How are we educating the doctors and then the patients? How are we securely collecting the data? And then what kind of programs can be written to raise red flags if the blood sugars are rising, if there's a new medicine involved? Do you need hourly testing to make sure the patients are safe? So a little bit of that can be kind of backfilled in, if you will, to the medicine involved, the concerns involved, the risks involved, and we're really well trained in all that for you.
Okay. There's another aspect of connectivity, and that has to do with the equipment itself. And there's an emerging kind of game-changing trend and capability that's coming out that directly relates to post-market surveillance. And you currently have the ability to monitor real-time use data of a particular piece of equipment that's either in a laboratory setting, an office setting, or in the operating room, if you're able to get through their firewall. And if you understand the real-time performance of these devices, and if it's a battery-operated device, back within the quality segment in an organization or the R&D segment, knowing that a particular battery is running low in a particular account somewhere globally, you can dispatch someone to address that, so you don't have downtime in the operating room. So that maximizes efficiency, and that addresses some of the payer concern about reimbursement for some of this remote capability. And some of the performance data that can be managed, temperature, use times, pressures, flow rates, power settings, knowing how a particular piece of equipment is performing on a daily basis would be pretty valuable information to go back to an R&D group for the next generation of that product development, where if the unit was only using 2 out of 10 from a particular power delivery standpoint, like an RF ablation device, for example, your next generation may not have to have that degree of power in it, because you have that actual use data that is not being lost, and it's you're not relying on a sales rep or a biomedical engineer or someone within a particular setting to get that information back to the company. So we designed sensors for that capability, and you can transmit that information back to someone's laptop in their office, in their engineering office, and you can catalog that information over time. so you can see how that device is actually being used. And there's one element that makes the adoption of this a little bit easier, is that there's no patient data. And it's weird to say, but sometimes the companies really don't need to know about the patients because we're all about the patient. But in this case, we're more concerned about how the equipment and the systems are working versus the specific patient that is being used on. So you don't have that as high of a level of confidentiality to deal with. And I do know of companies that are designing in essentially empty space into their electrical boxes for that future capability. They may not know what they want to measure or remotely monitor in the future, but they know they're going to need it. So they're essentially establishing a space claim within their equipment to add in sensors later on. So they're being more proactive with that aspect, because it's really tough to redesign the stuff once it's in the field. But that's a technology that exists right now, and it can be a real differentiator for companies, where you can minimize the need for field service, field intervention, dispatching of a biomedical person to go to a particular area to fix something, because it's really cumbersome within the complaint handling and the logistics involved of refurbishment after the fact. If you can get ahead of this stuff, if you can be proactive with your post-market surveillance, that's a real differentiator, and it's something that the governing bodies are going to start looking for, because as the capability becomes more available, someone like the FDA is going to be asking companies why they're not employing this technology with their equipment, because it affects patient safety and downtime and efficiency and cost to the healthcare system. So it's one of those trends that's out there, and it's gaining a lot of traction.
Thank you, Paul. And then talking about different technologies, artificial intelligence, everybody thinks it's like a bad science fiction movie with like certain metal robots I'm not going to mention directly. And it's big data. And I would like us to talk about how big data can be used to make diagnostics better.
Sure. Well, researchers and clinicians they're progressing with the potential of AI in analyzing like medical images, like mammograms, to aid in cancer diagnosis and screening. The aim is to generate evidence for the benefit of using AI to see if it can increase the detection rates of cancer. And currently, the radiologists and the people that interpret images, these 2D images, they're highly trained, and they're hard to find, and they can get burned out. So if you can utilize a believable, reliable, automated tool to do their job better with them, then one, they can process more patients in a particular day, ultimately. And then two, the sensitivity and the ability for AI to pick up on elements of these images that the human eye or the level of training of the individual may preclude, then you're going to be able to detect things better than we can now. So there's a tremendous potential in kind of the diagnostic imaging space for AI, and it's being explored essentially everywhere right now, and it can be a real enabler if used correctly.
And I think that can be custom tailored, right? So you don't get a huge amount of false positives. As the work goes on, you can refine exactly the data you're receiving and how to interpret the data. Is that correct?
There's going to be a long research period here to to use these capabilities, because now you're relying on a software program. So you need to test and validate these systems over a long period of time against the current gold standards of how these images are being interpreted. And it's all progressing. It's not quite there yet 100%, but the potential is certainly there, and there's a lot of money being put into this area, for the reasons that I outlined.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We have another question.
Yes. All right. Proactive post-market surveillance. Love that topic. Have you seen impacting related to incorporating materials in your projects when it's relevant to their clients' needs? Yes, and I will say that it has been used in certainly component selection with particular devices, and engineers can tend to over-engineer stuff. I can say that because I sort of used to be an engineer. If we can design something in, we're likely going to do it because it's exciting and you can kind of get caught up in the moment. But you can design in elements and capabilities that are not needed in a particular device. So it gets out in the field and you end up simply not using a particular feature. So a proactive post-market surveillance like that on a current generation of piece of equipment can be pretty enlightening to say, we're not using this control over here at all. And then you can dig into that a little bit for the future generation, or revising the current piece of equipment that you're dealing with to say, we really don't need this. So you essentially design it out, and it represents a cost savings and a simplification for the future. So we have seen that actually being used for component selection. The question was specific to materials. I haven't seen an element at the material level just yet. So thank you, Spencer.
Thank you. And something I'm notorious for is embracing all startups eagerly and enthusiastically, which I would still do every day. But I'd like to talk with you, Paul, about ways to effectively design a product from beginning to end. Generally, as a prototype, we enhance the prototype. We might add software. Just in general, kind of nuts and bolts and steps involved in bringing a new product to market and what those look like.
All right. Well, that'll take the rest of the day. I'll pick a piece of that, especially in the startup realm. We see a number of clients, as you know, Justin, that they'll come to us and they have a very, very broad market segment target where a technology is going to solve everything. And the advice that I would give is to really try to focus on one particular aspect or one particular application of your technology, and don't fall in love with your technology. And it's not, the technology is not going to sell itself. There are a lot of different elements that need to come together to make it successful. So think of post-market surveillance. Work back from there. Or what is truly your next step in your development? And if the first answer is, full commercialization, think of the steps involved to get there. Think of your next 3 months. What do you need in the next 3 months to continue to be a viable company? Are you trying to impress some investors? Is there a convention coming up that you could need Boston Engineering's help for example, to make a demonstratable device for your next investment milestone? Think of it in pieces, but what we see is we see essentially an investor pitch deck pretty much every single time that says all of this can be achieved. and that's great. It's great to have a large vision, but when you're talking to a one particular investor, they're going to want to see that you have all the pieces covered, that you have reimbursement covered, that you have inventory management figured out, that you have a path to actually get commercialized.
Yeah, perhaps a patent that
Yeah,
you have legally. Yeah.
yeah. Don't cause your potential investors to have to piece it all together for you. Show them the path. Show them that you have everything covered. Build their confidence level. If you go in with if you're saying your technology is going to be, so widely used, they're not going to believe you. And if you pick an application where there's a true clinical need for what you're developing, and then stay very focused on that and cover all the other elements when you're talking with your investor groups, um, you'll just build their confidence that you have everything covered.
Yeah, perfect. That kind of segues into market adoption. It's something I struggle with. If you basically make a beautiful new hammer, how many well, hammer's a bad analogy, but if you have a new medical device that you think will be really important, how many people are going to sign up and change their existing process?
Yeah, you really have to understand what you're up against, because if you're a single product company, it's really tough to break into established markets. A lot of the big companies have purchasing contracts with a hospital where they're providing hospital beds, consumables, everything you can imagine, and they have certain pricing established for that. And those contracts are for a period of time, 2 or 3 years, for example. So if you come along with the next best device in your mind, it's really tough for those organizations to adopt that because they are currently under can be a fairly restrictive purchasing contract with large device providers. So you need to find that differentiator. You need to truly show why you're addressing a clinical need. And that's a buzzword, but it's real. It's what are you trying to solve? How do you make the clinician's day more efficient? How do you demonstrate um, you can do an additional case in a certain add on a number of cases to your caseload in a particular day, because your device is so much more efficient. There's also the patient benefit. What is the real patient benefit, and drive adoption that way? So it needs to be presented either in patient benefit, time savings, efficiency, cost, and really drill down into those. And don't assume that people know what you're talking about, because everyone's busy. You only have a certain number of seconds to get your point across, and just be very focused on what your particular offering is going to do and how it's going to make either a surgery more effective or a clinician's day easier, not more difficult, and really, really, really focus on that. It's easy to demonstrate equivalence from a regulatory submission standpoint. That's easy. The adoption piece, you need to think about that as well, and say, ask yourself throughout the program, why would someone use this?
So, and something I've seen is abdominal type of surgeries where the camera technology has gotten much smaller, so the incision is much smaller, so the procedure becomes less invasive. They have better resolution cameras, so the clinician can actually see in much greater detail, faster, safer. It might pick up more medical issues, like they see a tumor or something like that. So those types of things are really important to focus on.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on some elements of surgical robotics, which is also a very hot topic these days. And robotics is certainly an enabler. But all pieces of equipment, all devices, they can distance the surgeon from the patient. And surgeons like to be close in and hands-on with their patients. So you need to make sure that you're actually enabling, and you're not getting in the way of something. These are very complex systems. Every element has to work seamlessly. And there are technologies out there that address some of this. Force sensors, for example, uh, and how far they've come, and enabling what's called haptic feedback. So if a surgeon moves their hand to the right and the instrument inside the body is touching a structure or piece of tissue, the surgeon actually feels that in their hand. That type of feedback is achievable these days, and it's the how much the surgeon needs to squeeze on a handle to actuate something, or laterally move a device within the abdomen or another joint space. Uh, getting that feedback uh, via force sensors can be a real confidence boost to the user that this piece of equipment is enabling me to do something that I couldn't do before. And it's not a matter of, well, I need to learn something completely new here to enable this to help me to do what I need to do. So remember that whatever you're developing, it can get in the way of uh, of a procedure or test as easily as it can be an enabler. So
Okay.
again, ask yourself a question: am I really making things simpler, or am I actually getting in the way? If you're getting in the way of something, then we get back to market adoption. It's going to be really tough to adopt something if you're adding a half an hour to the procedure. It's just not going to happen.
Or
So,
if the procedure itself is drastically different,
yep,
they would have to learn something brand new that they might not be comfortable doing.
correct. Yeah, there are a lot of established practices, and it can be hard to have highly skilled and highly trained people kind of change their mindset. And you come along and say, yeah, I get the next best thing, and you have to show them why. And you
Yeah,
have
the old New England saying, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," and we come up
That's
against
right.
that sometimes.
Yep, we absolutely do. So we work with our clients in that regard. We drill down with them and say, what are you really trying to solve here, from a clinical standpoint, from a business standpoint, and then we can help them with the regulatory strategy as well, with the testing and the evaluation that's going to be needed. And always reimbursement is, unfortunately, needs to be front and center with all these business cases.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. And we're everybody in the audience. We're coming up against our time crunch a little bit, so thank you for staying a little bit past 12:30. I'm Justin Makris. My email address is at the bottom of this border. So jmakris@boston-engineering.com. Absolutely happy to field any kind of emails or calls, whatever you want to do. We really appreciate all your time this afternoon. And thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Have a great rest of your day.